Oh yeah. So I guess I could just talk about this now while we're waiting. After this panel at 2:30, we're going to have a game jam session, a 1-hour game jam. And instead of making an entire game in an hour, you guys are going to make a game concept, a pitch, some artwork, music, whatever you want to do. So that starts at 2:30, and before that, we wanted to ask if anyone wants to think about some themes and submit them. Just kind of like write them on a piece of paper and bring them up here, give them to us. We're going to like put them in a hat or something and pick out a theme. Oh, yeah.
Only good no snowman.
Maybe I should take out the social justice thing.
Well, if we have to, you know what? I could put the laptop down there, and I could probably use my mouse remotely. Okay.
That's a good one.
I could run it because my mouse is wireless, so that's what we did last time, and that actually. Yeah.
Figure out what this means. Google it.
See, I just see ISIS. ISIS.
I guess that would be good. Yeah. I mean, I could probably see it here though.
I'm sorry.
Those 3D glasses.
Everybody reads them differently. That's what makes it so much fun.
At least that's the reason why I like the world.
Throw it in the trash.
I think I want to go wait. Just like, do a little dance in the hallway and be like, "Welcome to the FMC wonderful Q&A channel."
Yeah.
My cable's fucked up.
Famous
I
game
don't think
developers.
Way too literal.
You don't know what they look like, right?
Set the HDMI.
I don't know, we made Mario and stuff.
You got Mark Cerny, Phil Fish, and
No.
Jonathan Blow, Ed McMillan. Let's just tell them that's who we are.
Yeah,
They won't know.
yeah.
I feel like you do the.
I'm back.
Well, because Harper, you know, I really need
I'm more Rami than
No,
you.
no, no.
Oh, I'd have to shave this. Yeah, you got the under.
If the HDMI cable doesn't work and he doesn't have a visual, then they won't have to know who you
Yeah.
are.
Nobody has to know. Wait. Crap.
Hot mic.
It's on the extend screen.
I like eternal life then.
We're not on the schedule of events.
Are you serious?
It's from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And then there's nothing. So,
That could be a reason.
Kevin, are you thinking of some fun themes?
Not for real.
maybe major.
Guys, ready to get this started?
Let's get this show on the road.
All right, let's do this. Hi everybody. Welcome to the Game Jam Q&A panel at MAGFest. Game jams are about making a game in a very short period of time, like maybe 2 days or so. These guys have a lot of experience doing that and running game jams, and I'm going to introduce myself and our panelists first. So my name is Frank Force. And that's my real name, and I make video games for a living. I currently work at Certain Affinity. I've done a lot of Ludum Dares, worked on a lot of AAA games, and have made my own game engine and stuff. And I'll be hosting and also running the Game Jam panel that comes afterwards. So if you have any questions about the Game Jam panel, you can just ask me. And we got Will, who is experienced Ludum Darist. And what do you have to say about yourself?
I've done a lot of Ludum Dares. I've done a lot of global game jams. I guess I haven't really, but I've done a lot of game jams. I have a game called Red Shift, Blue Shift, and Mivs downstairs that I did at Ludum Dare and spent a while working on with my partner Alan with our studio Hyperreal. I run RVA game jams with my friend Lauren Vincelli. Momin is an active participant, and we do meetups for game jams. We hang out, we teach each other, learn from each other. I won first place in Ludum Dare 31, and there's a website.
Yeah, so a lot of these guys have games in the Indie Showcase, and I encourage you to stop by and check out their games and ask them any questions you have over the next couple of days. They'll be there. Sonny is also a Ludum Darist. He's done a ton of game jams, writes amazing music. What do you have to say, Sonny?
Well, first of all, the GIFs aren't working.
Yeah, oh, that's my bad. Sorry, I had to download a PDF. We don't have internet.
It's all right. My name's Sonny Bone. Like Frank, that is my real name as well. I've lost count how many game jams. It's at least 20. I don't remember. I won 3 Ludum Dare medals, 2 golds for audio, and my studio is Phantom Green. Currently working on a game for Steam and PS4, and I can't talk about it.
Oh.
You just did.
Momin also has a MIVS game, done many Ludum Dares. He was, these first 3 guys were all part of our Game Jam Q&A last year, so maybe you remember them from that. Momin, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Momin. I'm like a programmer designer, and I'm in Richmond with Will. We do RV game jams, a lot of game jams, and yeah, I have Clash Cup Turbo down in the indie area, so come check us out.
We're very excited to have Susan Gold here, who is the president and founder of Global Game Jam, and she has ran so many game jams and conferences and been a speaker in many places. Susan, can you say a few words?
Few words. You don't know me very well. I don't know what few words are. When I came up with the idea of the Global Game Jam, the goal was to not only create an opportunity to make games, but to collaborate with people you've never met before, to create communities. And that's why having a panel like this is really, I think, important, because these are the community of people that are making games at the Game Jam. And for me, it's really exciting to meet those people. I get to go to a couple of the Game Jams throughout, but it's usually whatever city I'm in, I happen to do the Game Jam at. So I've only got to meet people in Vancouver, Florida, or Boston, and then I've traveled and done a whole bunch of the opening remarks around the world, so it's interesting to look out from Skype and see an entire audience from Tunisia or whatever. But the fact that game jams bring people together are what I think are the most important part, and that you have that collaboration of these really brilliant people coming together, making something new, and making something new in 48 hours, which is amazing. So I'm very proud of what the Global Game Jam has done, but I'm also excited to be a part of a community that is pushing boundaries and challenging themselves outside of work all the time.
Chris Totten he also has an MIVS game, and he does a lot of stuff. he was also here last year.
I'm tired.
What's up, Chris?
No, that's true. No, you said I did a lot of stuff. I'm like, I'm tired.
He also ran, last year we had a Global Game Jam here at MAGFest. I don't know if you guys remember that, but he actually ran that, so.
Yeah.
I have stickers, by the way.
So, wow, you summed it up pretty well, actually.
Yeah, that's all you need.
I run the local chapter of the IGDA, International Game Developer Association, and we've run a lot of game jams, including Global Game Jam since it existed. We've done a lot of game jams, like little apartment jams, like little one-time off things because we just felt like it. We've had a lot of members do Ludum Dare and things like that. And then, we try to, in my role as game designer in residence at AU, we try to incorporate the idea of game jamming into our classroom. So rather than trying to teach people under the model of you're going to go to game school and then at the end of 4 years you're going to work together with a team and make kind of a game. We're like, okay, welcome to the first semester. All right, here's a simple game engine like Game Maker. Make a game. And we send them off, and they make lots and lots of cool stuff.
That's cool. Yep. Taro had yet another MIVS game. And he also did this thing called One Game a Month, where every month you make a new game.
Yes, correct.
And he also, all those games in the corner there, those are all part of his MIVS game, which is kind of like it seems like a WarioWare kind of thing.
Correct. So, can you hear me? Okay, good. So yeah, I'm making a game down there called Not a Clone. So it's basically a WarioWare Inc. for mobile. I'm working currently both as a full-time indie game developer as well as an events coordinator at Tech Valley Game Space, a local game community where we do Ludum Dare actually quite regularly, a real-world meeting. And other things I do includes treasurer for being for our local chapter at IGDA Albany. That's my company down there with a URL. And yeah, I did one game a month. That was a very fun challenge and a very cool way of improving your game development skills and understanding better about game design and whatnot.
All right, so you've heard a little bit about these people. They're very talented, experienced game jammers. So feel free to just raise your hand whenever you have a question, anything. We are really looking forward to answering questions this time, but I also prepared some slides that we're going to kind of go through just to keep things moving along. But feel free to interrupt at any time and ask a question. Just raise your hand. Okay, so the first question I have prepared is, let's just talk about like why Game Jam? Like why do this?
It's like, if you're not game jamming, a lot of the times you're not making a game, and when you are game jamming, you are making a game, and making a game is a lot of fun, so that's why I...
Good point.
I'm a big proponent of game jamming because I think it's really easy to get into the mode, like I just said with the school thing of, oh, this game has to be really big, and then we keep adding stuff, and then the project kind of languishes for a while in limbo. Game jams are great because it's like, by Sunday I've got to make a thing. So like it's an excuse to create and have output.
Well, one of the reasons why I created the game jam was so that people would feel like they could make a game, because I think sometimes they approach it like it's overwhelming to them. And the fact that you're just going to do this itty bitty little slice in 48 hours, at least for what the experience and feedback I've had, is people come back to me and like, now I know I can do this, or now I know I want to do this for a living, as opposed to I kind of thought I did, but I wasn't sure what it meant, and so that kind of thing. Yeah?
Yeah, I'm actually going to school for computer science, like programming, because I'd like to design games and program them and be able to, create them as well. And for game jams, like, well, two questions, like for game jams, if we go to a school that doesn't have them, can we go to like the website, possibly request to have something set up so people can come over, or, whether it's somebody coming over to set it up, or something like that?
Depends on, like, Ludum Dare you can do from anywhere, but like for the Global Game Jam, if you want to have a location and it's not at a school, but you're going to make it open to people, we're open to you having a location anywhere you want. It doesn't matter. We prefer that it's like someplace where people feel safe and there's parking and all that other stuff. But as long as you're up front, like, and you say this is this space is my house. I had a guy in Romania, I swear to God, he was 14 years old. He desperately wanted to be a part of the Global Game Jam. And we were like, oh, but you're 14 years old. Like we tried to do 18 and above. And he's like, no, my mom's okay with it. And so we got the mom to say she was okay to have people at her house. And he had 5 people there, but, it was the first jam in Romania,
Yeah.
So we were totally open to it.
Straight up in Romania.
Pardon?
This is straight up in Romania?
Yeah, that was...
Oh, okay.
So like, I don't encourage people to open up their houses to that many strangers. It's just not good. But I also don't. I would rather you like drove 20 miles to a jam as opposed to and meet people outside of your circle of influence, because that's really important, is meeting, creating this community of game developers. And I've even done things. One year we had somebody in some obscure place in Tennessee, and they were not within 100 miles of another game jam. And so I just set it up so that they game jammed with a group of people in Wales. And
Nice.
and then the next year, guess what? They got on a plane and went to Wales.
That's awesome.
So,
So
I've got great stories.
And yeah, just listen to you for an hour. So,
I'm available at the bar.
so we in our IGDA chapter a couple of years ago, and we've done it a few times since. We used to like I started with our IGDA like in the middle of the year away from Global Game Jam, but I remember the meeting I first went to was the meeting right after sort of like a homebrewed game jam. They were just like, hey, do we want to like jam this weekend? And people just, you can have your own. It doesn't really need to be around any big structured event. And that's a great way to get into it too. If you have, like you said, you're in computer science, if there are a couple other CS majors or, if you find some artists or some sound designers, get together and say, hey, let's just have a game jam. And there's actually, so there's this website that I'm a part of called Game Jolt, where you can post your games for free. And it's a social network for indie game developers and get feedback and give feedback and things like that. But they just added a new page for jams where you can put up, if you're doing a DIY game jam, you can get a front page for your game jam and like a sign up list and everything. So they give you the tools to be able to put some stuff together.
Yeah, at my school, our game dev club does their own jams, and we just use the library. There are definitely public spaces that you can find to use that have free internet. I mean, a coffee house might even be open to it. Well, I don't know if like a big corporate place would do it, but like if you knew the franchise owner, or I guess they don't have franchises, but whoever it is, and say, hey, we'll be here drinking coffee for 18 hours a day. They'll be like, our place will be full and you'll probably want to eat stuff. Sure, I don't know. Every local place is open to different things, and it's just a matter of people in the neighborhood and taking advantage of the fact that they need you as much as you need them.
Co-working spaces are often pretty open to it. But I would say if you're at school, just use their facilities. Like, even if you do the whole like ask for forgiveness instead of permission thing, because like schools have so much space that's totally underutilized that it's like just do it. Like.
And you said at your school that you're learning, you're in a computer science program. Talk to the people there. I mean, even if they just may not know what it entails. And on the Global Game Jam website, as many of the other websites, we have exactly what here's what you need: internet access. Period.
Yeah. You don't even need that either. I mean, so the grand majority of game jams also accepts card games, board games, and other similar tabletop games. And I'll be completely honest, those are also really good places to get started on video game development because, at least I like to think that games are just a set of rules. Yeah. And there is a lot to learn from just writing down a bunch of rule set and then playing it and see what sticks. So honestly, like you can do it really cheaply if you want to.
At the university level too, the thing that a lot of universities will want, if you do set something like this up, if you find a faculty mentor, that's how student organizations get started. So, maybe try to see if there are some faculty members that are amenable to this. And
Actually, I'm sorry,
no, go for it.
Well, I'm transferring to, you said you're Northeastern, right? That's where you
I am, yeah.
I'm actually going to Salem State, and I talked to the computer science professor there, and like she's really open to, she's helped like some of her students like who wanted to make games. She's helped like them kind of get into it. Not like a game jam session, but she's very like open to helping everybody when it comes to like computer science, especially like games, software, all that stuff. So that'll be very easy to
well, and if you want to come and join us at the Global Game Jam, you're more than welcome in Boston. MIT has one, Becker has one, WPI has one. I mean, the amount of schools that have them, usually there's something relatively close to someone. But in the rare occasion that there isn't, there are ways around it. We really like the fact that you have physical contact with people because there's nothing like looking across someone eye to eye and learning something from them or watching what they're doing. It's impossible to do online,
I've learned that when it comes to like projects in school, like where I've had to do like big, computer science projects with people, and you know, it's not like it's impossible to work with them, but it's way, way easier to kind of like just be, you know, to be like, if you're working next to somebody on their laptop and you can see the line of code they're writing, you're just like, oh no, that code, that line is wrong right there. You have to like, it's gonna be an error, you gotta fix that, instead of like, you know, having the internet cut out when you're talking to them and Skype's all cracked or anything like that.
Can I add something?
Oh, please.
First, I want to know why everybody's here. Like, do you guys make games? Raise your hand if you made a game.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Oh, wow,
Okay.
just half of you.
So now raise your hand if you want to make games, but you haven't.
Of
Nice.
course.
Okay. All right, so why Game Jam, right? That's the question.
Yeah.
That's the
that
answer
was
right there. Do you want to do it professionally, or do you want to, is it just a hobby? If you want to do it for a living, Game Jams is the best way to get into it. I wouldn't recommend going directly to game school. I wouldn't recommend getting a computer science degree like I did. I recommend just doing Game Jams. That's going to get you as far as you can to figure out if you have what it takes. Yeah.
Well, in regards to game jams, I'm not quite sure if it's like kind of like a common thing that shows up, especially among first timers. But is there like kind of like a certain anxiety about it, like
Yeah.
Yeah, that's.
something that is in their eyes good or acceptable?
Well, you know, there's literally thousands of people doing it at the same time, and there's thousands of games, and you know, there's varied levels of skill. Everybody's not awesome at everything to start with. For instance, my first game didn't have any audio in it because I sucked at using my time wisely, and then I went on to come in first place for audio twice because I learned from it. So, you know, I had anxiety going into it that I wasn't good enough, and then when I started to get better at it, I decided, you know, I am. So now I'm doing it professionally.
How much of us had anxiety at their first game jam?
Yeah, definitely.
Pretty much every game jam. So.
I actually,
Every game jam.
I actually want to add one more thing to that why game jam slide, and this is a best opportunity as any. One other argument I was gonna make for why game jam is it is actually an absolutely safe place to completely fail.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, it's expected.
It-
We live in a culture where we expect things to succeed. And you know, you're on this line of thinking of you have to get things right the first time. A game jam is the first, for me, kind of like going into a game jam was the first time where I realized that is not how reality works.
Yeah.
And you know, if you fail, if you don't get a game done, that's okay. You just show off what you got done during the last, you know, couple of hours, and you say, "This is what I got done," and people will still clap for you because they know how much work went into
Right.
it.
Can I add something about the anxiety thing? Let's say you made a game and then you went to MIBS and showed it at MAGFest to random people that are expecting to play an awesome game. You're going to get a different type of feedback than when you submit something to a game jam, because these people know what it takes to make a game, and they're going to have some empathy for that whole process, and they're going to give you really good feedback as opposed to just the general public.
I have one also comment. So the first Global Game Jam, I had personally invited friends all over the world that were relatively famous people in the game design world to participate in the Global Game Jam. And I get this phone call, and it's from Tokyo, and it's a pretty famous person, and he's like, "Our game didn't work. I don't want to put it up there." I'm like, "No, you have to put it up there." And he's like, "No, I don't want to put it up there." And I'm like, "No." He's like, "Do you know who I am?" I'm like, "Yeah, I know who you are." He's like, "But everybody will know what a failure I am." I'm like, "That's exactly why I need you to put it up there."
So there's this, I think it's a War Inspector quote, and I always tell it to my students, especially because I do the game jam in the classroom thing, and they have to make like 4 games in a semester. So he always said, like, your first 10 games are going to suck, so get them out of the way fast.
No, he said the first 100 games. are
Oh,
gonna
the
suck.
first 100 game. Well, then yeah. Well, there you go. And I always tell my students, I'm like, well, there's 4 out of the way. But yeah, like, talking about the anxiety, there is always that anxiety of like, is my game any good? But like Taro said, you know, if you fail, so what? It's out of the way, and you got out of the way, and you learned something, and it meant something because you made something.
And that's why I love Global Game Jam. Like what Susan was saying, the proximity to all these other developers, like sitting across from people, it really makes you feel better. Like we all had anxiety going to our first game jams, but when you're in this room with a whole bunch of people trying to make a game, it just makes you feel really good and makes you feel confident in your work.
And bugs are fun to find, let's face it. Like, we cheer for each other's bugs.
Exactly.
Like, your game crashes to end your presentation, everybody's like, yeah!
Question?
Yeah, it's kind of funny how you said, like, game jam's kind of more worth the effort than the programming, because I'm actually just about to graduate with my bachelor's in computer science, and part of me does feel like I spent a lot of time on the school and not as much time doing games.
Right.
I did end up being able to work on a game during school, which was great, but kind of like, I forget which one of you said where after the project is like actually due, it starts to wane off. Because it's done to what that was for, but not necessarily for something bigger than that.
Right.
So I definitely can see, and the hardest thing is because I'm balancing the school, game jams kind of also make it seem intimidating because of how much time you have to invest. Now, I know like they're doing an hour one, which
Right.
I really like that idea because it's such a, I mean, not so much when you're actually doing it, because then you actually really put a lot of pressure on it, but so much that it's easier for a lot of people to say, oh, I can dedicate an hour and try to see if I can do that.
You can apply the concept of jamming to anything you want and put any time constraint on it that you want. The reason why 48 hours is because it's really hard to do anything less. My original, when I had started up the idea of the Global Game Jam, Jonathan Blow, who maker of Braid and Witness, he told me, no, you can't do 48 hours. It's not enough time. And I'm like, well, I can't get people to give me more than 48 hours, you know? And he's like, oh, you need at least a week. I'm like, who's going to take a week off of their life to make a game? Oh, you need a week. I'm like, this is talking from a guy who took 3.5 years to put a game together. So, to him, that seemed like small. But the reality is 48 hours is, in my mind, the shortest. I mean, I've seen 24-hour game jams, but like those
I'm
people
used
are.
to 8 hours myself.
I think 4 is a good number
Yeah.
too.
4?
Yeah.
Are you crazy?
If you're like really experienced, you can make something decent in a short
I
amount of
can't
time.
say
but-
my name in less than 45 minutes.
Yeah.
I did make the unconventional stick swinging simulator in 12 hours.
If you have a team also, it's good to have a lot of time. So you can actually get a lot of contribution from your team members. If you're just one person, you can kind of make something really fast. But
You could do
Susan is
stick
right. Like the quality of game you can make in 48 hours is like orders of magnitude better than like a shorter time.
Yeah,
So-
and like we had a guy give a production team management talk at our last game jam, but before the game jam, and he was like, well, we try to get the game, the core components that make it playable, done in like 15, and then the rest is like polish.
Right.
But 48 hours, if you're new, it gives you enough time to like cobble something together. If you're experienced, it gives you enough time to like, I've seen some pretty polished, but that's because stuff come out of like 48 hours, but that's because these people have done it a million times and then just know how to scope things properly. And there's like enough wiggle room in the 48 to teach you a lot of those really great lessons, I think.
And it's hard to get feature creep when you only have 48 hours.
Yes.
Feature creep is your biggest problem.
I think your question kind of went off on a tangent. What were your question was going to be at the end?
Well, I mean, the thing for me is, after I graduate, it's not going to matter as much. So I can.
With the time, you mean the time constraints? Right.
I live in PA, so my closest area would be Philly, and they do have.
They have a great game jam there.
Yeah, they have, and for me, it was just hard to go down there and stay there long enough.
Oh,
Driving is a-
you don't have to sleep. It's a game jam.
You also don't have to go anywhere. Some game jams you go to a site. Other game jams like Ludum Dare, you stay at home and do it from the comfort of your office. 'Cause
I would recommend trying to go someplace just for 48 hours. Just try that experience because it is very valuable.
And honestly, most places that are open 48 hours for the game jam, they have a quiet place where you could just crash. There's an entire Tumblr of people sleeping at the Global Game Jam. That's awesome.
Really?
You know, oh yeah, the drool out the side of the room. Yeah. People sleeping at game jams, I think.
So would you recommend, like, after I graduate, to start really focusing on that?
I would say like now.
Why wait?
Why wait, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you have a laptop, you could tonight do like an impromptu game jam with friends, and like even if you have a couple of hours to do it, just like doing.
The hard thing is to find people to do it with.
So that's why going someplace, going to an actual game jam will start to increase your network, and that's one of the key reasons why I did it. I have some crazy examples, but in Peru, two people wrote me and they wanted to do a game jam, so gave them the okay to have a global game jam space. Subsequently, it grew from 2 to 13 people in like a matter of a day of posting it on the website. And then by the time they were done, I was going down to Peru to talk to the government about helping develop Peruvian game development community there. Like they just had never thought that would be a possible thing for them to do. So creating community is one of the biggest things the Game Jam is supposed to be about. But it also helps each and every person because they get to meet people that they didn't know were interested in jamming. So you said you're close to Philadelphia, but you're not in Philadelphia. Well, maybe if you are 50 miles away or something, like maybe there's a community college that'll host it and they'll be open to it, and then you can start getting more and more people. Or I know people that go to a different global game jam every year around the world. There's a couple, Dawn Rivers and Ben Taylor, who the first game jam was at Carnegie Mellon, and then subsequently they haven't jammed at the same place twice.
So I'm going to take the shameless plug approach and say the panel after this, where we are going to be having the 1 hour game jam, you can participate in that, meet some people there, and if you did want to do that, sort of like go back, to the hotel room and bust out a game, that's a thing you could do right here at MAGFest. And truth be told, my MIVS booth downstairs, if you came downstairs and had a game, I'd be happy to take a look and help you get it on Game Jolt or something. That'd be cool.
That's the one great thing about conferences and being around other gamers. Everybody will give you their 2 cents about your game.
And frankly, most people, you go to GDC and talk about anxiety inducing environments for somebody who's new. My first one, I was like, oh my God, all the famous people, they're gonna know that I'm not a real game designer, or something like that. Well, exactly. Imposter syndrome. The struggle is real. But then, you say, hey, you meet somebody and they'll be like, what do you do? And it's like, oh, I'm working on this game with some friends of mine. They'll be like, awesome, you make games. And even if it's something that never sold anything, you're in. People are very welcoming.
The hardest question for me is, what games have you made? And I'm like, well, let's see. You've never heard of them. It's just
50 of them you've never heard of.
It's just but I make games, right? So you don't have to worry about feeling like you're an imposter. Everybody that makes games feels the same way. It doesn't matter how famous you are or what you've done or what your gameography is. The fact that you're starting is all that people care about. And when you go to find a job, if you don't have a gameography under your belt, nobody's going to look at you. You have to have games made in order to get that game design job. It's just not going to work otherwise.
Having a website or resume, listing all of the game jams that you participated in, I think is a great way to kind of pad out your resume if you're wanting to break into the industry or whatever. Okay, wait, let me just say something too. After this panel, like Chris said, we do have a 1 hour game jam, which I think is a great way to get into it. It's a lot less pressure because no one's going to actually try to make a game. What you're going to do is make a game concept. It's a lot different from this panel because everyone's going to split up into groups and you guys will just go on your own. These guys will help you. But you're going to try to come up with a game concept, not just any game concept, but a 48-hour game concept, something that you might go on to. So if you're anxious about game jams, if you don't know what it is, that's a really good way to kind of just get a little bit of practice, and then when you do your real game jam next, you'll already have gotten rid of that, a little bit of the anxiety for the first time kind of thing out of the way. Yeah, question?
Could you go over a little bit of the process of how a game jam works?
Sure. I'll get the process of how of the people's making a game, or
Like
How-
if I go to a game jam and I'm going to spend 48 hours, what's kind of my 48 hours going to look like?
breakdown. Okay, yeah, we could definitely talk about that. What do you? So it's probably different for everybody. You guys want to chime in on
it's very
some?
personal.
So, well, there's the group formation process, right? So what happens at a game jam is you find out what the theme's going to be. You don't know before you get there, typically. And in the first couple of minutes, you have all these people amassed in one room, and then they hear this theme, and their brains start going, and ideas start flowing, and you start talking about those ideas. And every location I've been to has different group formation processes. Some people are like, oh, all the programmers over here, all the artists over here, blah, blah, blah over here, and then, we'll just do, like speed dating for it. Other people have different processes for doing it. Depends on how big the game jam is. Like if you have 200 people, it's a lot of organizing of how to do the group forming process. Whereas if there are 20 people in a room, you come up with a couple of good ideas, and people are like, I'm going to do that.
Yeah. And then like.
And then you just go do that.
Usually, so like the 48 hours, it usually starts on like a Friday evening. So usually what I do, and I've talked to some other people that kind of do this, is like the first night, you kind of get your idea going, you kind of get like the environment set up, because you got to get your game engine and your code and stuff. You get that set up, and then on Saturday and Sunday, you're kind of just like working all together, working on ideas, you're iterating, coding, features, adding features, and then kind of like halfway through Saturday, you kind of figure out what is awesome about your game, what's unique and awesome about it, and then the best thing to do is to just focus on that idea and polish it.
Cut the rest.
And cut the rest and just focus on that and make it awesome. And then by the time Sunday evening rolls around, you've got this like awesome playable game, and you just show it off to everyone there, and it's like super fun.
So things that we've done at our sites, and they're going to sound very big and official, but they don't have to be. I've mentioned like pre-jam speakers, and you don't have to get like a famous person. You can get, like, we community source it. And, we'll get somebody who we've jammed with before to come in and talk about, like, oh yeah, like this is how I manage a team, or this is like how I polish my game, particle effects. Like
Lots of it.
Yeah. This is how, crowdsource, like get your friends together to give each other tips. That's one thing that I really like having as part of like the pre-jam thing before we do show the theme. You mentioned like knowing midway through Saturday if your idea is like viable and things like that. We'll usually include like some sort of mid-jam break time where we just say like, hey everybody, I know it's hard, put your game down and like come down to this room, and we've got some snacks, and like play each other's game. Getting people to play each other's game and get around to feedback is really nice. But yeah, I mean, game jams are pretty beyond like start, finish, and then if you're doing like global game jam or something online, like time to upload your game. It's pretty open, and you work with your team largely to make your schedule up. Like, oh yeah, this is when we're all going to go to bed. Like people will schedule that.
One of the other things in a game jam or what to process is like, what role do you want to take? Like if you do AI every day in your real life, maybe you don't want to do AI in the game jam. Maybe you're like, hey, maybe I can be a sound designer today. And that's what I love about it, is that it's the opportunity to wear a different hat and see what else I can do besides what everybody knows me for, right? Yeah. So, I program. Oh, well, maybe I want to do the art, and there's something to be said for programmer art. most everybody has something to say about program art.
Any art can look good if you can make it look like it's just the style.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think with just like from like a game jammer perspective, I think the ideal time would be like if it starts Friday night, you try and come up with your idea and you do a really quick, messy prototype of it Friday night going into Saturday morning. And then by the end of Saturday, you kind of want to have your game done because then you have Sunday to fix it up, add a title screen, add music, add the art that you want to add, put the website up. There's a lot of stuff that kind of lurches at you at the last minute that you realize you didn't really have time for. And like, for me personally, it never goes that way, but I think kind of having that framework in mind helps.
In the Global Game Jam, we have like little checkpoints, like, you know, you need to register your group by X time. And that way it makes you kind of think, oh, okay, what are we going to call this, you know? And so it like kind of pushes you in that direction to some degree. But we have some more questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Two really quick ones. How do you guys personally handle project scoping for a game jam? And is there any kind of standardized game dev platform you use, like Unity or Unreal Engine?
No standard platform at all.
Whatever you're most comfortable with, or
Yeah.
try something new if you've done a lot of game jams. But there's a lot, like you had mentioned, Unity, Unreal, there's a lot of free game engines.
Paper, board games, playing cards, whatever.
Haxflixel.
Construct,
Haxflixel.
Right.
Sure. And what
If
Will
you're
said
Richmond,
is about your time is going to vary a lot depending on what you're trying to do. But like Will said, you need kind of like a rough framework. Day one, rough prototype. Day two, get basically everything done, feature complete, we call it. Then day three is polish phase. But how that actually works, you might not do music. You might spend 5 hours on music. It's kind of up to you a little bit how you want to budget that time.
The scoping problem is something you're just going to have to figure out over time.
Mhm.
You're not going to be able to, whatever you plan the first night, I guarantee you it's not going to go that way.
Yeah.
So
I like to
Your
have
ideas are always too big.
I like to
And
have
it's
a
always
lot of
good
scope,
to like put
and
them
then
as tiers, like priority.
yeah.
Always prioritize,
Nice,
yeah.
but doesn't have to. Oh my God, if we only had time, you know, like. that kind of-
Prioritize all your features always, so you know what to cut when you run out of time, because you will run out of time.
One criteria I actually found was rather easier for me to kind of scope things is that if the game can be described in one sentence, then that's probably
Absolutely.
small
Yeah.
enough to be able to
Yeah.
get started. And,
Yeah.
you know, if you're like especially good, Angry Birds is probably what you're going to be ending up making, that level of scope of game. You're definitely not making an MMORPG or a JRPG
Yeah.
or anything to that effect. It's not happening.
Right. But if you do want to make something like that, you can kind of think to yourself like, well, what do I really love about that type of experience? And then you can just say like, well, I really love like the turn-based battles, and then you can just focus on making something that's purely that or
Pick
something.
one feature and
Right.
just focus on it.
And there's nothing that says you can't stop working on your game afterward. In fact, like most jams
Yeah.
have that into their mission is like, oh, and you're going to do this afterward probably. A lot of games that are very famous now, like famous indie games that have won major awards like the IGF, have started as game jam games. You know, there's a bunch downstairs that started as game jam games.
Global Game Jam.
Now,
Surgeon Simulator.
Simulator, yeah.
That said, I am going to say, in regards to what I said earlier about the one sentence thing, there is one regular game jammer at a location who literally writes a book of her game design and still manages to make it. So like, you know, whatever style works. For me, it just happened to be that one sentence was just perfect.
I happen to agree that one sentence is usually the best for any project. Like if you can't tell people
Yeah.
in one sentence or less what it is you're doing, then you really don't usually know what you're doing.
So our process for picking teams is that we give you a sheet of paper and a Post-it note. You write your game idea on the sheet of paper, put it on the wall, and then everybody gets to pitch it. And then you take your Post-it note, write out your name and what you do on your Post-it note, and like after everybody's pitched, you all break, walk around, put your Post-it note on the sheet of paper that is your that you want to work on. The ones that always don't get people to work on them are the ones that are like the really long pitches. The ones that can, one guy got a team of 11 for Global Game Jam, and they finished this game. It was extremely polished. This was the guy that talked about his production process. So the theme of this past one was ritual, and he was like, Wade Boggs, pre-game preparation simulator. So like, this really superstitious baseball player, you had to like find a chicken restaurant in every town and like eat the chicken, and then also like, keep your batting average up that way. And that was, but all he did, he's like, Wade Boggs superstition simulator. And that was it. And then he got a huge team. So, yeah.
Before your arm falls down.
How much like pre-written code
None.
You're really not
None.
supposed to use that. It actually does depend on the game jam, though. Some game jams allow using stuff from before. Obviously, if you have a game engine that you're using Unreal, you can use that. But all the assets, music, art, all that stuff, all of the code is expected to be made during that time.
So there's one type of game jam that I do want to give some lip service to. Most of us are from the world where we have a game jam where it is the sort of spontaneous indie focus, where it's like, do all the things there, prep there, work with people you never worked for. But there are such things as like event game jams, and organizations and companies will usually put these on. So if you are trying to get a game jam in your area, this may also be an avenue, even though you get more restrictive types of things. But like we had the White House Game Jam in DC, and they told us what the theme and everything was beforehand, and people brought their own teams. But that was a game jam to like produce something to be shown at the White House. So, they wanted it to be like these really polished experiences at the end of the day. So those exist.
Yeah,
And-
they're the serious game
Yeah.
jams, and I don't personally feel those work super well. So that's just my personal opinion, but I tried.
That one was super
push that.
pre-prepared. But yeah, like those exist. They're a thing. So sometimes, but other like a normal game jam, I wouldn't prepare anything. I think it's more fun when you're coming out of left field totally and you try something new.
You should. We do recommend that you have, if you're a programmer or something, have your development environment set up, so you don't have to be fumbling with installing this, installing that.
So Taro
but
is
that's
super
it, yeah.
awesome and does that, and then distributes it online, and is super helpful to everybody.
That's great.
Last I checked, the Ludum Dare said you're allowed to have base code so long as you declare it, so I'm like, well, why not?
For us, we hope everybody starts new. But one of the things at the Global Game Jam is we try to introduce people to new tools. So like this year, King.com had created a new engine called Defold, and we made that available to anybody in advance of the game jam so they could get to learn it, that kind of stuff. Houdini and particle effects and all that other stuff we made available for free for a year. The goal for each person is different, but sometimes for some people it's just learning something new. And of the respondents to the Global Game Jam survey, 50% of people say that they learned something new, a new tool, a new software, or a new approach, something in the game jam, which is huge. And then that they were going to then take that and use it to everyday life, I thought was a remarkable thing, and tells you what the power of the game jam is.
I can vouch for that.
Just FYI to our panelists, we got about maybe 15 minutes or so left. So we're going to try to get through these last questions. There's at least one other slide that I really want to get to. So what's your question there?
I'm not sure if I'm missing a point here, but are there limitations on the codes you can use in it? And what's the craziest language you've ever seen something done in?
Wow, there's lots of crazy stuff. I mean, Ludum Dare, people do submit some really weird things to Ludum Dare. Pretty much any language you can think of, there's been a game jam using that language, if not completely structured around using that.
I've seen like NES games, like assembly programming. They do the classic style.
I feel like Sauce has made at least one
Yeah,
Commodore
Fortran or
64
something.
game.
Wasn't there a Ludum Dare game where a guy made a custom Arduino console for his game?
That sounds familiar.
Sounds
yeah,
awesome.
It's like the weirdest electrical hardware and stuff. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the Global Game Jam, one of the years it was like you had to come up with something that you couldn't use your hands as an input device. So people are like, you're like, what, you can't use your hands. So they just use voice, But, the fact that people are pushed to try and think of new ways of experiencing it. Also, one of the things is, try to experience it through a different set of eyes. So, like, what about games for people that are colorblind? Like that. We found out that our logo was not colorblind. It's like you learn new things, and so like sometimes we'll like throw out a constraint that is set up to make you think about what if you didn't have hands to play a game, what would you do, and that kind of stuff. But crazy stuff I've seen. I think in the Nordic Game Jam, that team that couldn't come up with. They didn't have any artists, so they came up with the dark room sex game. So it's essentially a dark room, and it was a rhythm game, with a Wiimote. So like there are crazy things. You had to, it's a crazy. You just look dark room sex game. It's pretty funny.
We once had a game where it was a split screen shooter a la GoldenEye, except instead of split screen, the split screens were layered on top of each other. It was called False Sense of Self. So you had to figure out like what your screen was and have deathmatch.
Nice. Let's do your question. You've been waiting a while. Yeah.
So yeah, I've done jumps with friends before, and they've been great things. And normally, like we come out of them with like a lot of pride and like excitement. And so people will start taking on stuff they want to do afterwards, but inevitably it seems like it just falls apart. So I guess I was kind of going to ask, is it worth doing that? Should you just do another project afterwards, or like you going to continue the project? How to kind of like go about that?
Yeah, some of these guys in the Indie Showcase this year started out as, I think, Ludum Dare games. I know Will's did. It depends on the game, really, if you want to keep that momentum going or not. And the team itself, sometimes teams just kind of fall apart.
Right. I think we've talked a lot about game jams in the context of teams, but I think solo game jams are a whole lot of fun. It's a really good way to test yourself and like not be. I think for a lot of people, the teams are really great because it provides a network, it provides more help. But for some people, like myself included, a team is kind of like really frustrating and like provides me with a lot of anxiety, and especially after the jam when we're like talking about what to do with it, because it's at that point you don't have like the deadline bearing down on you to make decisions, and it's just like so I think in my experience it's been a lot easier to take solo projects further.
It also depends on the quality of your code, because the 48-hour code is going to be pretty much garbage. So you're probably going to want to start over if you do that. And if you have a team that's splintered up, especially if somebody's coding something and another guy's coding something else and one guy drops out for the post-compo thing, you're going to run into a big problem. You're just going to have to wipe and
but
start.
I have something that's kind of a little contrary. 10% of the Global Game Jam games go on to be published, and so this year was about 7,000 games. I don't know what will happen with that group, but about, and of that, 1% of them like actually go to IGF and go to on to major success. But so there is a reason to move forward if you like it, right? Mm-hmm. So the great thing about a game jam is that you can walk away with it or walk away from it in 48 hours, or you can continue to work on it. And for some studios, like if you talk to Tim Schafer, they use their game jam. They have a 2-week game jam called
Amnesia
Fortnight, and that's where they come up with all of their intellectual property for the year. And so people are using game jams as ways to stimulate their own IP, as well as give everyone in the studio a way to have a voice, because it could be the receptionist that comes up with the next great idea. So it gives everybody equal footing in the workplace. So I think that the fact that you can throw it away is great, but the fact that you can build from that, even if it's just building on the idea of the mechanic, like, okay, we did it in here, but now let's go take that mechanic and make it into something big, is something that's very viable.
Yeah, so I think it's fine if your game team kind of breaks up afterwards. that's totally okay. It probably means, you know, you weren't as dedicated to the game. Like, that's fine. Just try another game. Next game jam, maybe it'll stick. So like we've all made a whole bunch of games, and we've just walked away from a lot of them. But some were so good, and we were so dedicated to them that we stuck with it.
And nothing says you can't recruit new people.
Exactly. Yeah, it doesn't have to be the original team. If you really like your game, take it, run with it.
Taro and I worked on a game to completion that he started as a game jam game. I wasn't on his team, but he's like, I need an artist, so there we are.
But also, when you do that, make sure that those people that sign off and say, I don't want to do this anymore, you get them to say that this is your intellectual property.
Yeah.
Because if all of a sudden you are Surgeon Simulator and they're like, hey, I want part of that, then you'll be kicking yourself. So just make sure to get them to sign away their rights.
Yeah. Let's do another question, or-
Would you guys mind if we just do this slide really quick? Because our panelists really wanted to talk about this.
Yeah.
And we can also, if there are questions we don't get to answer, we're going to have half an hour between this panel and the next next game jam. Plus, you can ask questions during the game jam as well. So let's talk about this, because our panelists they have a lot of opinions on this. How do you define success and failure? That's something that is, when you're making a game, some game jams have winners, like Ludum Dare. Some game jams don't have anything like that, like Global Game Jam. And just generally, like, what's that like? What's that affect on your psychology and stuff? What do you guys think?
For me, simply, it's if you've, learned something and achieved something new that you haven't done before. If you've, like, transformed yourself to a better person, I think that's success.
You took mine. Yeah, I agree.
I think
If you
it's
learn
everybody's
something
that.
new, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
so
It's hard not to be successful at it.
I think I'm the weird one up here in that I'm not a coder. I'm not a
I'm not a
Okay, so I'm not the weird one. So yeah, I'm an artist, and for me, game jams are opportunities to try out new art styles. I if I'm doing a lot of 3D, I'll be like, I want to do pixel art today for the game jam, And I've even done self-imposed game jams where I'll be like, you know what, I'm gonna make my game art out of paper and then scan it in, and then see what that does. So I've done stuff like that. So learning things is important, pushing yourself is important. And then again, like I said, if you make something, and by something, I don't mean finished, awesome, polished game. I mean, anything. Broken pile of poo. Did you make it? Did you add something to, I think Mr. Rogers had something about this where he's like, I'm not very good at drawing, but I created something, and creation is important. So
I think
no, Mr. Rogers said something like, they both said it though.
success is getting number one in Ludum Dare.
Yeah. If you get number one, I think that counts as success. Yeah.
But for me, I mean, like, success is many things, but if I've had a good time, if I've challenged myself, if I feel like I've learned something, yes, but those are all pluses. But I also like the fact sometimes that I just got a chance to work with great people. That to me is something that everyday work, like, oh, I appreciate my peers, but you don't say thank you. But if you have a great experience with a group of people over a course of 48 hours, it's like a high. Like you're just so charged up, you're so excited. That to me is the success, is like creating new friendships. And the Global Game Jam, I can't even tell you how many couples have become couples at the game jam because they worked with someone for 48 hours, they respect them tremendously, and then they got a chance to know them, and they became, relationships. I mean, famous ones too.
I think
I'm going to be the one dissenter here, and having fun or that kind of stuff are all good, but that's not my definition of success. My definition of success, and this is actually greatly inspired by Stay Quran's keynote on Global Game Jam 2010. It's on YouTube. I highly recommend you check it out. He says, somewhere in there, he says something like,
The journey.
Yes, the 100 train ride. Somewhere in there, he says something that make sure that the game that you're making impresses at least one person, and that one person felt like he or she did not waste any of their time playing your game. that every single moment that they played it was worth it.
See, I thought he said it was about the journey of making the game.
Well, I think that, like, in the long run, game jams aren't about success or failure.
Yes,
I think
that's true,
what's
too.
really cool about it is that you have hundreds of successes and failures in one weekend.
Yeah.
And, like, at the end of it all, it's just a good time. It's not really, yay, I succeeded, or boo, I failed.
But by the way, I'm going to clarify with the first time I went to Global Game Jam, I was able to impress one person who said, "You're able to complete a game by yourself in 48 hours. You've impressed me." So this is the low bar you just have to clear.
Nice.
So, and I'll even take another alternative stance. So if you are doing this for the first time and you are the person that's like, maybe I want to do games, I think maybe I don't, I'm trying to figure this out, so I'll go to a game jam. If you figure out that you don't want to do that, that's actually success.
Definitely.
Because
Yeah, I
now you've not wasted any more time trying to like struggle to do it. If you just don't like it, that's cool. Now you know.
I don't think that anybody on the stage can say whether or not you're a success or a failure. I think as a creator, that's your decision alone, and that includes critics. Unless you're selling a product and the customer has a specific expectation based on the product description and the price, you can fail to meet that expectation. But when you're making any kind of art, whether it be games or music or a movie or a painting or a picture, as a creator, you get to decide if you failed or not, and everybody else can just shut the hell up.
Yeah.
And really, it's always a success having done a game jam. I would be very surprised if someone did a game jam and came out wishing that they didn't, feeling like they wasted that time. Like, it's such a valuable time. Even if you don't end up finishing, you don't end up with a final game, you still learned a lot, and you're that one step closer to actually making a game next time. And there's no saying you can't just keep working on that game after the jam and finish it up or whatever. So, do you guys? Yeah, just question. Sure.
Backtracking a little bit, legal stuff in general, especially regarding IP, people at game jams. I brought up Tim Schafer and how they were doing that, like who owns what in game jam like that.
So the
It
Global
really
Game Jam
depends.
is very specific. It's a Creative Commons protection. Everything, you can build upon other people's stuff. It's open source. However, you have, we've written it all down. We've written down, rules of, attendance. We try to make it very clear. But whatever you decide amongst your team as to who the intellectual property holders are, according to the Global Game Jam website, if you put I have these 5 team members, and then you go on to make the game a big success on your own, those other people are a part of the game on the website, but only for that version 1, right? For version 2 and beyond, it's all up to you, and you have to get a lawyer and trademark and do all that other stuff. But we can only protect you under the Creative Commons license on our website, and that's how, I don't know how Ludum Dare does their IP protection.
With Ludum Dare, you own your game. For the competition, you have to provide source, but that source is still your property.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you're allowed to see it, but you're not allowed to edit it or, actually use it to compile our code or anything like that.
So, as somebody who's set up an LLC for their game stuff, single owner LLC is the easiest, and you can just do it on your own taxes. You don't have to do separate taxes for it. When you are working with a team like that, you usually come up with some agreement, and
Paper agreement, by the way.
Yeah, paper agreement. I'm not going to go into the full details of all those, but yeah, come up with some operating agreement, and it's usually you're going to have everybody who helps you out, if you're the LLC owner, is going to be a contractor, and then, you come up with the actual.
We've had actual
Specifics.
studios develop out of the game jam because of the people that they met there, and they're like, I want to work with you, so let's do this. I've even had people come up to me and say, I saw somebody else's work from a game jam on the West Coast. So the two guys that met on the East Coast moved to the West Coast to work with that guy because they respected and liked their work so much and started a studio that way. Everybody, but you do have to cover your ass, so to speak.
But don't let the legal stuff scare you away from game jams. You don't need to worry about that at all. Just go do the game jam and worry about that afterwards.
Honestly, if you're worried about it, the only thing you need to worry about is copyright infringement, which is a very easy low bar to clear. You just don't steal assets.
If your game is 70% different from something else, then it's different.
Any more questions? Okay, we're like 5 minutes over now, but I don't know if anyone's going to kick us out or what. We do have the game jam in about half an hour from now. That is in the Chesapeake JHL or whatever room, which is probably maybe that room. Or
I have some
That's
Global
right
Game
across
Jam
the way.
stickers also.
So we're going to migrate over there. If you'd like to join us for that, please do. It's going to be a really good practice session.
Decorate that badge.
If you have any other questions, you can come up to us. We'll be here hanging out. So just you can come talk to us about anything.
Thanks.
Yeah.